Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is optimizing the experience in Dynamics 365 Finance and SCM. My name is Cora, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session with a dedicated Q&A at the end. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Kevin Honeyman, Dynamics 365 Design Manager, and Jason Green, Power Apps Program Manager. Kevin will kick us off today. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Cora. Well, let's get started. So today, our objectives are to try to help you understand the importance of optimizing the user experience of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, review the personalization capabilities that are available for Finance and Operations applications, and help you learn how to approach optimizing for your organization. So to get started, let me tell you a story from a couple years ago. I went to visit a customer who was complaining about usability issues within Dynamics 365. I met with multiple frustrated users who complained to me about the experience they were having. I still remember the most frustrated person I met that day. He was a purchasing agent who spent the majority of his day creating non-inventory purchase orders. He relished in challenging my design skills. He, said, how could any designer think this is a good experience? I asked him to share his screen and walk through the creation of a typical purchase order. I quickly noticed that he was not working with an optimized or personalized experience. Instead, he was using the out-of-the-box purchase order form that we shipped from Microsoft that was designed for creating inventory-based purchase orders. I watched as he tabbed over many unnecessary columns to complete a line on the purchase order. I spent the next hour with him going through the PO form to hide all the fields and actions he didn't use to create a non-inventory purchase order. The partner and IT staff observed as we did this, and they were concerned by the amount of stuff that we were hiding. When we were complete, we estimated that we hit about 80% of the fields and actions on the form, and this purchasing agent loved this new experience, and his frustration quickly turned from me to the partner and to the IT staff, wondering why they hadn't helped him do this in the past. We then proceeded to have a conversation about, is personalizing the experience to this level a safe thing to do? And should they roll this out to the full purchasing team? The partner and IT staff were concerned because at this time there were issues with personalization breaking on updates, and there was no capability to publish views to others. After much discussion, the purchasing agent said, hey, wait a minute, guys, I don't care what you decide to do here because it's so beneficial to me. I'm willing to make these personalizations after each update if we had to. It was very interesting to see that the most frustrated user in that company turned into a raving fan after we personalized his screen. I learned that day the power of personalization and how less is truly more. And I look back on this story now a few years later and realize that the partner and IT staff were right in being cautious. Personalization was not stable at that time. It wasn't the right thing to do to roll this out to the full purchasing department. But I'm excited to tell you that today is the right time to start doing these types of personalizations, and these do truly improve the experience for our users. So what I want us to focus on today is I want us to think about all of the people that use Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. This is a list of the various roles that we ship within the product, and there's many different people, accountants, purchasing agents, shipping clerks, auditors, production planners, and even somebody called the water spider, which someday I might learn what that person does. But I want us to focus on these people and the experience that they're having and how can we optimize their experience. So Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations was designed to show all the content by default. The user experience should be tailored to each user through the role-based security, through configuration keys, and through personalization. Although some of our users are telling us their experience is overwhelming or complex. They tell us that they use less than 50% of the user interface that they see, and they say it takes too many steps to do their work. And what we want to talk to you today is we need your help to optimize the user experience through personalization, partners and customers. And the reason we need your help is because the experience that we design out of the box for Microsoft can only go so far. And we can create a good experience, but we need somebody to fill this gap. And what we're going to talk about today is by filling this gap, by optimizing the experience, we can get to a much better experience for our users. So today we're going to use a tool called menti.com, and we're going to ask you to go to this site, enter in this code, and answer some questions for us. So we have a couple questions at the beginning, a couple questions at the end. And to kick this off, first off, I just want to know what best describes you. Are you a partner, ISV, customer? If you're a customer, which area in the customer do you work in? Which department? Finance, human resources, project? So please go ahead and answer this question, so we get a kind of an idea about who it is that we're talking to today. So I'll just pause here for a second. So it looks like we have lots of partners and we have some system administrators from the customer. So this is ideal, great audience to be having this conversation with. So thank you for helping me fill that out. A couple ISVs, person from the finance department, and a couple others. Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to the next question. So tell us about your experience using personalization within Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. And I have a spelling error for personalization here. So we have quite a few people with substantial knowledge, deep knowledge, a few people that are wanting to learn more, some people that are just beginning to learn about personalization. So thank you for providing that input. Okay. Very good. That'll help us kind of understand what we should be, how deep we should be going on some of our demos. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay. So thinking about all these people, all of these roles that are using our product, what are they expecting from the user experience? And I want to talk through some of their expectations. First off, they are expecting the product to just work for them. They're expecting it to be designed for them, and they are expecting it to help them be efficient. And so let's just dive into each one of these. Users are asking for the product to just work. Forrester released a study earlier in the year saying 8 in 10 people are connoisseurs of great user experience and consciously pass on products that don't meet their standards. Both Gartner and Forrester predict that there's no longer a generational divide for experience quality, that most people expect their work tools to just work and deliver the same high quality design and ease of use and enjoyment that their everyday consumer apps do. They believe the pandemic sped this up. And this was, everybody knows ERP products have a reputation for having overly complicated experiences. And this was tolerated at a time when there was little overlap between the tools we used for work and those we use for play. Although advances in mobile, social, and cloud technology have blurred these lines. And now we're in a situation where Dynamics 365 users expect consumer-grade experiences. And these raised expectations have transformed the software that we use. On the whole, pursuing a consumer-grade experience makes our software simpler, more visually appealing, and more naturally intuitive. And so what we're doing at Microsoft is we are spending a lot of time trying to understand what is a consumer-grade experience. that our customers are expecting. So we've developed some frameworks that we're using, and we believe it's critically important for our business and for the people that are using our products. And the thing to understand here is our users do not have a choice often in using our product, and they can't pass on using it because it doesn't meet their standards. If our end users are frustrated by their experience using Dynamics 365, they're going to be frustrated with their job. If they feel empowered by our experience with Dynamics 365, they'll be empowered in their job. So we're working hard to ensure everything we design and build at Microsoft going forward is going to have a consumer-grade experience. So let's talk about design for me. This has been a long-standing goal for Dynamics 365 is we want users, when they use the product, when they see it for the first time, that they look at this and go, wow, this was designed for me and the job that I need to do. But let's imagine for a second that you are starting a new job at a construction company as a laborer and you see a wall of tools in the shop. What would your reaction be? Wow, there's lots of tools here. It's kind of overwhelming. It looks like it might be difficult to reach those tools at the top. I'm not sure what some of these tools are for. Do I need to learn how to use these tools? Am I qualified to do this job? My fear is that some of our users have the same feeling when they first start using Dynamics 365, because we've heard similar comments. Wow, there's lots of stuff in Dynamics 365. What is all of this for? Do I need to learn how to use all of this? I'm going to need more training. Should I have taken this job? So this does not give the user the feeling that this was designed for me. But now imagine instead when you join this construction company and you're a skilled craftsman and they hired you to do finished carpentry. If you saw this wall of tools, this looks like it might be designed for the work that you do. The primary tools are on the wall, so you can get access to them. Other tools that you use infrequently are tucked away in some drawers in the tool cabinet. You still may want to optimize this wall of tools to make you more efficient, but it's a much better starting point. And this is the biggest challenge we have at Microsoft, designing for Dynamics 365, because we need to design for so many roles, so many industries, so many countries. It's difficult to design the ideal experience for everyone. So at Microsoft, we're constantly trying to improve our tools to help users be more efficient in their work and require less training. But we'll always need a way to optimize that experience to the company and the individual user's needs. And currently, personalization is the best way to do this. And lastly, let me talk about this, the user's desire to be efficient, and they want their tools to help them be efficient. So have you ever seen this? You're on a college campus, city park, there's perfectly good sidewalks, but then there's this path through the grass. And why do these paths form? These paths are formed because people are trying to be more efficient. If this is on a college campus, and a college student has 5 minutes between class, he's going to take the shortest route to get where he's going. But if you're on a leisurely walk on the weekend, you might take the full sidewalk. And I think this is where it's kind of the difference between a consumer grade app and a work app. A consumer grade app, oftentimes you're not worried about being efficient. But in a work situation, you're always looking for efficiencies. It's human nature to look for efficiencies in everything you're doing. So these are called desire paths. And we need to be thinking about how can we allow our users to have desired paths, shortcuts, ways that they can be more efficient. And in our case, having a desired path within the user experience is not bad for the environment. It's not bad for the lawn. It's perfectly acceptable. And we should be looking for ways to kind of help our users be more efficient. And a couple examples of users being efficient in Dynamics 365. You'll see people create favorite menu items. You'll see users memorizing keyboard shortcuts so they don't have to go between the keyboard and mouse for data entry. You'll see users editing data in Excel because they find it faster to do mass updates than in Dynamics 365. They also spin up a new instance of Dynamics 365 in another browser tab to continue working after taking an action that may take some time. Searching for forms using navigation search, and kind of the newest one is, creating views and tiles of popular queries they perform so they don't have to filter every time. So I think the key thing here is we need to optimize these experiences for each of these people using Dynamics 365 so they feel it works for them, it was designed for them, and it helps them be efficient. And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Jason and let him give a demo of all of the personalization capabilities, and then I'll come back and talk about how you can optimize for your organization.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So yeah, I'm going to spend the next few minutes just talking about what's available with personalization. From the poll that Kevin put out earlier, it sounds like most of this audience has quite a bit of knowledge, which is fantastic. So I will run through things a little quicker, but I do want to touch on what's available for those that may not have as much experience or may not know as much about personalization. And so I'm also going to, as the tip that Kevin just gave, I'm also going to move between or navigate in the application using navigation search, because I feel like it's the most efficient way to get through. So I'm going to go ahead and go to all sales orders so you can see the kind of the quick shorthand you can use to get to that form. And I'm going to go ahead and drill into a record. And so when we land on sales table, I'm starting here for a particular reason. So this is the most complex, the largest form that is shipped out of the box. If you look at this from a modeling standpoint, there's over 1,000 controls on this form between the grid view, the lines view, and the header view. If you look at all the actions in the action pane between all these tabs at the top and all of the menu buttons and the toolbars, there's over 200 actions on this form. And so if we don't do work to kind of trim this down, this quickly becomes a very complicated and overwhelming experience for users. And so that's where we're going to start today, is just what can you do with personalization. So the first thing that we're going to look at is if you just right click on a control and hit personalize, you'll get some options for what you can do. And so the first one is you can rename. So that's one particular option that's available through this right click personalize option. Hide is the other one that we're going to focus on. So hide is going to be your best friend whenever we're trying to optimize these experiences. So we'll go ahead and click that. You can do this one at a time per control, but I generally recommend people go into personalization mode. So if you click options and hit personalize this page, or if you're like me and you like keyboard shortcuts, you can do Control-Shift-P and you will move into personalization mode. And this is kind of where you can do this all in batch. So if I come in here to the hide tool, I can just start clicking on groups of things or fields that I don't use, and really starting to clean up my interface. Again, this can be fields, this can be actions, this can be things up in the action pane if you want to get rid of entire action pane tabs. Most of the controls on the form you can hide if you don't use them. So that's going to be your best friend to try to clean your form up as much as possible. There are other things you can do to improve your efficiency, especially for data entry scenarios. So for example, there's this require, where if you need to make certain fields be mandatory for your scenario, you can set that on fields. It works the same way, you just click it and it becomes mandatory. You can add fields. So if there are things here that you use that you don't, that isn't here by default, you can add those. You can do moves, so you can start to rearrange the order of these. I generally will recommend, while drag and drop does work, for the fields on the form like this, I generally recommend using the keyboard with up and down arrows and enter. It's a little bit more reliable. There is the skip tool. So this will allow you, if you're doing data entry and there are certain things that you need to see but you're not going to fill in, you can take them out of the tab sequence so that users don't have to spend that extra tab stop getting through fields. There's this lock tool that if you want to make something read only, you can do that. And then the last one is the show and header one, which allows you to specify fields that you want to show up in the header part of these fast tabs. So this is nice because you can kind of promote these values up into the header and you can collapse those sections so you can still see the values without having to use up the space. And then the last thing that you can do from these forms is add an app. So if you have a Canvas app, a Power app, if you have a third-party website you need to embed, or a model-driven app, you can add those to the form. You can embed those directly into these forms with this add an app as in this case, as a new fast tab. And so there's a lot of functionality here to really pare down the experience to what you really need. And then in addition, anytime that you're expanding collapsing containers, we'll remember that by default. And so I have an example of what this could look like. So again, we have this really complicated form with all these actions. You've got your really wide grid, which you're probably not going to use all of those fields. For each of the lines, you've got all this extra data. So what if we actually are pretty aggressive and we try to remove things? I have a simple sales order sample here. So if I switch to this, you can start to see the power of what happens whenever you're really aggressive with this. I've cut down my actions to only the things I need. I have my sales order header with just a few fields that I need to fill in. I've cleaned up everything in the grid so that it's compact. It's only the fields I need. I got rid of the entire line details because everything I need to enter the sales order is directly in the grid. And this is much more approachable. This is much more usable for users. And we found that when we do this, users tend to be more satisfied with the experience. And so this is the kind of thing that we're pushing more people to do, this more aggressive personalization to really optimize and clean up these screens. So that's what you can do just quickly on a regular form, on kind of any form. What I'll do next is I'll move to all customers and spend a few minutes talking about what you can do on list pages. And so this is also important when we look at the views that are out there across kind of the ecosystem at this point. We see about 16 million personal views that have been created and 25,000 published views. So there's quite a bit of usage across the customer base. And 83% of those are on these lists. So users have figured out how to create views. The hypothesis is mostly on filtered conditions, so they don't have to come back to this over and over again and redo the filtering every time. But this is where a lot of the action happens. But just quickly, just to show you what you can do here, again, you can right-click hide. Again, getting rid of any columns that don't have data or that you don't use. We'll go ahead and add some columns as well. So we will search for credit fields. I'll add credit limit and credit rating. And those come in. You can see every time I make a change, there's this star on the view that means that I can save this. It has unsaved changes. So that's always nice. You can also show the footer if you want. It'll show you the number of rows in the grid if we know how many there are at that point. If you start making selections, it'll also show you the user how many rows have been selected. You can do aggregates. So view column totals. You can say I want to see the sum of the whole thing. If you have the extended grid aggregation capabilities features on, that's been extended lately to have additional functionality here. So you can do average, min, max as well. So again, all these things can be saved to a view. Maybe I'll reorder this and I will group by this column. And then I can get this kind of ad hoc reporting view, essentially, where I have a sum at the bottom and then I get subtotals in each of the groups. And all of these things can be saved to a view. So we'll do save as. We'll give it a name. I could choose to make this my default view if I wanted to, so that when I load this page the next time, it will also load this one. If I have access to multiple legal entities, I have some control over which views or which legal entities this view will be available in. And so I'll just save this. And you can see very quickly if I switch between standard view, for example, the out-of-the-box version, and I can quickly get back to this view of the form that I set up for myself. So this is super nice. The other thing that you can do quickly is I'll go back to my view and we'll just do a quick sort, or sorry, a quick filter. So you can filter these. Maybe this is my customers. So we'll make this the default. And then if this is a list or something, some amount of work that you know you're going to need to do, You do have the option to push these to workspaces. So under the options menu, there's this add to workspace option. So I have the sales order processing and inquiry workspace selected. You can choose to add this as a tile, link, or list to that workspace. I'm going to choose tile. The configuration screens are all very similar between all three of these. You can give your tile a name, decide if you want the count, and then you can pick the size that you want for that tile. So I'll just do the default here and add it to the sales order processing workspace. Again, I'm going to do my shortcut to get to that workspace, SOP. And you can see my new tile is here. So again, personalization's here. If I had turned on the Save Views for Workspaces feature, I could create views from the workspace and also publish those out if I want. If I come in here and personalize, I can also add this to the dashboard. So if I go to the dashboard and I scroll down to sales order processing, you can see that I've promoted this value. So any of these tiles that are important, you can promote from the workspace up to the dashboard and kind of build a view of the work that you need to do, or kind of an overview of your areas directly from the dashboard. One thing that I did not mention that I will go back and talk about on the list again is publishing, and this is an important piece for optimizing your experience. So I have my my default view here, my customers. What I can do is go in and hit publish, and so what this does is that this is a way that you can push out these views to certain segments of your organization. So we'll just call this my view published. I won't make it the default view, but you do have that choice. You can default people's experience. And so here is where you choose the roles. So I'm just going to pick system user. So this means that every user in the system that has a system user role will get this view in their view selector list. If I make it the default, it will be their default when they come to customers the next time they view the form. And so again, I have the same legal entity access control that I showed before. So if I publish this out, you can see that I do have my new view down here that I just published. So I can switch to it and it'll be the same thing that we were looking at before. So this is a really great way to kind of figure out what your experience should be for your organization or for a particular role, which Kevin will talk about in a few minutes, and try to give that out to your organization. The last thing that I'll mention is we talked about your workspaces and being able to add those tiles, lists, and links. If one of the out-of-the-box workspaces isn't right for you, you do have the option to start from scratch and build your own. So if you right-click on the dashboard and hit personalize, there's this add a page option. And so if you click the workspace option, that will allow you to add a new tab or a new tile in the dashboard, just like the out-of-the-box ones. And you have free reign to add whatever tiles, links, and lists that you want to that. You can build this for whatever you need. There's also options for adding full page Power Apps and websites. You can do that as well. Any of these that you add do have that same publish capability where you can give this out to users. And then the last thing that I'll mention before I give it back over to Kevin is kind of we have a bunch of administrators on the call. I'm kind of administering this. This personalization screen, admin screen, is kind of where you can go to get an overview of what personalizations are in the system. So there's tabs here to see which views you've published out to various forms. You can see which page it's on, how many people you've given it to, what the view name is. You have the same thing if you have any unpublished views. You have this personal views list where you can see all of the personal views across all of the users. So if you have a particular user that has a view you're interested in, you can go and create a copy for yourself and go look and see what they've done with it. So there is a lot of admin power that's built up in this form. And so, yeah, that's all I have for you today. I will hand it back over to Kevin.
And Jason, let me have you take one question. There was a question related to task guides. If you hide and rearrange fields, how does that impact a task guide?
So if you're using Task Recorder with personalization, the recommendation is that you're doing your task guide on a published view or on the default view. That way, when your users run that task guide later on, they're seeing the same things. But yes, if you do a task guide on some form and you've hidden controls, then yeah, the task guide isn't going to be able to find that to like point you to do something with that field. So there could be impacts there.
Yeah, and so thanks for asking some questions. There's some good ones in the Q&A coming through. Hopefully we'll get some more time to answer some more of those questions. So let me just talk a little bit about kind of the process that we're recommending for you to go about optimizing your experience. And most of this is coming from feedback that we've heard from our customers that are doing this. So the first thing we think people should do is try to optimize for your company and create what a lot of people are calling corporate views. So these are the views that are specific to your organization. And this is what we're recommending that you do is identifying the frequently used forms for your organization. And this is typically going to be things like your sales order, purchase order, journals, inventory, product, worker, customer, vendors, invoices, projects. Those are the things that are used most frequently by most of our customers. So identify those, and then for each of those forms, hide all of the content on these forms that you don't use, that doesn't make sense for your company. And I think the key thing here is every action you remove, it helps the user find the right action to perform. Every field you remove that's not necessary for your organization makes it easier to enter the other fields. So I really encourage you, if there's a feature that you're not using now, you may want to use in the future, hide it now and add it back in later. And so these corporate views are a great baseline for everybody in the organization. So remove your fields, back boxes, actions that you don't need within your organization. Then also, think about, renaming fields or actions. If you have something that doesn't make sense that we have labeled in a certain way, consider renaming it. If it's a field, you can do a customization to rename it across for everyone. But if it's a fast tab or if it's an action, consider renaming it on that form. And that's the terminology you're going to use for your organization. Also, rearrange fields and actions for efficiency. If you want fast tab 4 up in the second position, go ahead and move that. And then lastly, like Jason talked about, save and publish these views to all of your users as their default view. And so we think that these corporate views are really a great baseline for everybody in the organization. So you're not seeing content that doesn't make sense for your organization. And then once you've done that, we recommend that you identify some of your key roles within your organization and then go deeper and then optimize for those roles. So, and then for a given role, identify their key jobs to be done. And for each one of those jobs to be done, design a workspace for each of those jobs. A workspace is intended to be a page that they navigate to do that job, and everything they need should be encompassed there. We don't want users having to go back and forth between the menus to do all of their work. If there's things they need to do to complete that job, put it on that workspace. And I just want to talk a little bit about these tiles, these small little boxes with a number in it. These things are very, very popular with some of our users. They love the fact that they can create this view and they can pin it to a workspace and they can see the number of items in that view at any time. And people are using this to kind of manage their workload. So they come to this screen and go, okay, well, this number on the right should be at 0. I need to take care of that. So they can easily see the work that they have to do and they can kind of get access to that information really quickly, and they don't have to filter this data every time. So those have been extremely popular. And we've seen some customers create workspaces with nothing but tiles. Next, you want to create all of the filtered views to support all of those tiles that you want to have on your workspace. And the key thing here is in some of these cases, you're going to be dealing with some of those same forms that you created corporate views for. In this case, now you're trying to optimize for this role. So for that specific role, you get rid of all the actions that they don't need, and then create the filters that they need to do their work. And in some cases, we're finding, customers that are creating 50 different views on the sales order form. but some of those are designed for one role, some are designed for another role. And so you can have multiples of these. And then obviously then tie those lists back up as tiles on the workspace. And then you'll need to go to the next layer of, what are the tasks that people are doing? Are they creating purchase orders? Are they creating sales orders, creating customers, creating vendors? What are those tasks that they're doing? And then go to those forms and then optimize those forms for this role. And again, you might have a corporate view already for that form, but now you're trying to optimize for a specific role. So only show the actions and the fields that are necessary for that role. And you may end up having, for a given form like a sales order, you might have, 4 different roles using that form and 4 different views optimized for those roles. So in the end, what you're going to have is you're going to have all those forms set up, but the other key thing is you want to optimize the dashboard, and you want to optimize the dashboard to hide all of the workspaces that they're not using. And then you want to pin the tiles from the workspaces that make sense up into that dashboard. And then what you'll have in the end is you'll have a set of forms, you'll have the dashboard, you'll have a set of workspaces that encompass everything that user needs to do. And there's a small set of forms that are optimized for this user. And then you'll have some of these desire paths where you'll have these links coming from the dashboard and we'll go directly into these other forms. So looking for ways that we can optimize the experience so we can reduce every click we can to make these people more efficient. So let me just give you a few examples of what this looks like within Dynamics 365. So this is the dashboard that you would see if you're a system administrator. Nobody should really see this. Even a system administrator should be hiding the workspaces that they don't use on a regular basis. And so this is a great opportunity, very simply, to optimize that experience. So what we want to get to is we want to get to this. If this is an accounts payable clerk and they have 4 workspaces, have it so those are the only 4 workspaces they see. If there's some they use infrequently, they can still get to that through the menu. And then we want to get these tiles pinned up here. So the nice thing about this is for an accounts payable clerk, they can come to this page and they can look across at all of their workspaces and go, okay, and look at their tiles and go, okay, what do I need to do first? Maybe these past due tasks on financial period close is my most important thing today. So I'll go do that and then come back here and then look at what they need to do next. So that is very, very popular with our users. And then our workspaces. Like I said before, these tiles are a great opportunity. Look for more tiles for users. Look at the workspaces that we ship. Are those workspaces the best ones for our users, or should you start with a new workspace? And so think about the tiles they need to do their work and monitor the work that they have. Think about the list that you want to promote to the workspace, and think about all the links that you want to provide so this user doesn't have to go to the menus to do their work. Also think about links to other systems that they're using so they can come here to get access to those as well. So really trying to just encapsulate everything they need to do that job within this one screen. On any of our lists, there's great opportunities for improvement. And I'm just going to talk about vendor transactions and customer transactions for a second. Some of our customers have the same currency for their transaction currency and the reporting currency. And if that's the case, there's a great opportunity to simplify a form like this. Because what you're seeing here is you're seeing the amount and balance 3 times in 3 different currencies. But if those are all the same, you can hide all of those columns and make it much simpler, and you can see the account and balance. And again, like Jason showed, you can group this by status, for example, and then you can see those subtotals. And again, grouping has been very, very popular. People love when they can do these groups, and those groups can be then saved into views. And like I said before, sales order, purchase order forms, those are used very heavily within organizations. And so, you have an opportunity to personalize these. And I think the key thing is if you see standard view on some of these key forms, there is definitely an opportunity for improvement. And I think the key is, remove the actions that don't make sense. We've tried to set up security so the security will limit the number of actions that people see based on their role. but there's still opportunities to remove other things. And the key thing is when you run usability studies and you watch somebody perform a task, it's sometimes frustrating when they can't find the right task. They're going up there and they're clicking this, nope, clicking that, nope. And what you want to do is by everything you remove, every action you remove, every field you remove, the experience gets easier. It's more usable. Every little thing we remove, it removes a wrong path that they could take. So encourage you to remove actions, look for opportunities to remove fields, look for opportunities to remove columns. Catch weight, for example, is a column that shows up by default. There is a config key that we recommend you would turn off so that would not show up in the default view. But if it is on, certainly turn that off. And I think that in the story I told earlier, that purchasing agent was tabbing past the CW quantity, CW unit field every time, and he was asking me what that was for. And so those things should not be happening. These things just need to get removed. On something like vendors, I've had customers in Europe saying, you know, what is this tax 1099? What is that for? Again, this is a tax form in the US. If you don't have US vendors, you don't need this. So these are the kinds of things, some examples of things that you could be removing. So let's talk a little bit more about who we think should be doing this personalization and kind of when this should be happening. We believe that the best person to be doing this optimization is the person that's doing the training of the users. And we really should be optimizing the experience before we do the training. And doing it in the environment where you're training your users. And this can be a partner, it can be the system administrator, and I know we have a lot of you folks on the call, but I think it's ideal when it's a power user within a department. And sometimes we see these people called captains, sometimes we see these people called key users, sometimes business analysts, but they're people that work in the department that are training the users how to use that Dynamics 365 in that area. They're doing the configuration for that area, they're doing the troubleshooting. They're also the people that would be very good at, you know, optimizing the experience and doing the personalization. And if you personalize first and then train second, your training material is going to get easier. And I think we want whoever's doing this personalization to really be encouraging end users to further personalize their experience. Because you can ship these corporate views, you can ship these role-specific views, but then on top of that, the users can, you know, those can be locked down so that users can't change those, but they can start from those and then make further personalizations on top of that. And then at any point, you know, when you're trying to support them, you can go back to the kind of the base state of the corporate view or the role-specific view. And with that, I want to turn this over. I know there's been a lot of questions about kind of some of the personalization concerns, and so we're going to try to address this. And I'll turn it back over to Jason for this slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. I will go ahead and say that there's lots of questions in the chat. I'm trying to get to them as quickly as I can, but so we may get to some of them at the end. But we're going to spend a few minutes here talking about some of the concerns that people have, that we've heard in the past around personalizations and whether organizations should really dive in and use this. And so there's three that we want to cover and talk about whether these are myth or whether these are reality. The first one is that personalizations will break on updates. We believe this is primarily a myth at this point. I know there was feedback in the chat that I guess some people are still having issues with this. I definitely want to talk to you. We do admit that early on in save views, there were issues whenever you would turn the feature off and turn it back on, that would maybe cause some issues. There was some early versioning of different views where they originated from that caused some issues. But in general, I don't really hear this happening anymore unless there are breaking changes on form. So if someone changes a form to like change the data source structure on the query, it's kind of a breaking change on the form. It'll break the personalizations as well. But that seems more isolated and less systemic problem. Sorry about that. We do have multiple customers that have over 100,000 views in production and not having issues with this. So again, We think this is generally isolated issues and not a generic issue anymore. And again, if you are having issues, I think I put my email in the chat. If you're still having issues, I will love to talk to you. You can talk to me, you can go through support. Either way, we want to get this worked out because these are not supposed to break on updates. These should be persistent across so that you do it once and you're done. The next one that we hear is that we've heard that it might be difficult to provide tech support if users all have different highly personalized experiences. This is also one that we put more in the myth bucket as well. Yes, users, if we do encourage them to personalize their own experiences, they may be slightly different. But with the recommendations that we've been giving, if you have corporate views, which we recommend you do for all of those top used forms, that's kind of your baseline for your internal either customer or partner ISV support, where you can always have users go back to that corporate view as a baseline so that everyone's looking at the screen in a consistent way. So that's a great way to kind of mitigate any kind of tech support issues. And the same thing happens if there's no corporate view or if you're talking with Microsoft support, we will ask you to go back to the standard view to debug issues instead of looking at whatever view you have so that we're all looking at the same thing. So again, we don't think that this is more of a myth than a reality at this point. And then the last one, which there is also some allusions to this in the comments, is that personalizations can cause performance issues. And so this one is partially myth, and I would say partial reality. And so let's spend a few minutes talking about what that is. So most personalizations that you do, the ones that don't impact the query, should have very negligible impact on the performance. So if you're doing things like hiding, reordering, locking, requiring, adding power apps, adding things to the fast tab headers, that should have very minimal impact. I won't say zero because there is a little bit of overhead in just applying those personalizations when you load the form or when you switch views. But I would say the benefit that the user is going to see from really streamlining the experience is going to far outweigh the few milliseconds it takes to actually apply those personalizations. So all of those should be very safe. The things that can impact performance is when you start talking about changing the query. So if you're filtering or sorting or adding joins into your view definitions, that can. But this isn't isolated to just save views or personalizations, right? This is anytime anyone is messing with the query. So this could be devs at Microsoft or at a customer, or at a partner, at an ISV. If they're not being careful with how they're making queries on forms, that can cause performance issues. Before save views was even a thing, users would just ad hoc filter. And they could do that. They could save those queries as saved queries in advanced filter or sort, and potentially have bad query plans. So save views does give users a way to get into those, or to save those so they get back to those queries quicker. Which if they need to get to that data, they need to get to the data. But the thing we need to be cautious about here is publishing out views, rolling out these queries that have bad performance to a bunch of users. That's when you can get into some issues. So what kinds of things might impact performance with the query? If you are filtering and sorting on non-indexed fields, that can cause performance issues. It'll result in a table scan. The interesting thing here is that users don't know, probably what indexed and non-indexed means, or they don't know which ones are indexed and which ones aren't. And so we are actively looking at how can we put potentially some guardrails in place to kind of guide people away from these bad paths. Maybe we tell you, hey, the data isn't optimized for this sort. Do you still want to do this? It may take some time. So those things can cause the query to be slower. SQL, the way that it just optimizes queries, if you do a filter operator like contains with a wildcard at the front, it'll basically have to do a table scan. If you do or conditions like is one of, I want this or this or this, again, SQL's not very good at optimizing those kinds of operations. In general, we want people to be doing ands, so you want to and your conditions together. And if you're using indexes, the things that are going to be best is equals or begins with or less than or greater than. If you can string your filter conditions in terms of those operators, you'll have a much better chance of getting to a good performing query. And then the last thing is if you're joining additional data sources. If you're going into advanced filter or sort and you're adding more data sources, that can obviously make the query a little bit slower. And even if you add certain fields, the reference group fields, those will implicitly add data sources under the cover just to grab the value for that field. And so that can do the same thing. So yeah, table scans, generally bad. If it's a smaller table, if you don't have a ton of data, you're probably not going to notice. This is really going to be noticeable if you do this on tables with very large volumes, hundreds of thousands, millions of rows, and you have a bad query plan, then you're going to start feeling the pain. And so in general, we do have some recommendations to try to avoid, to try to mitigate some of these issues. The first one that I'll just mention is when Kevin talked about creating those corporate views that you want to push out to all users that kind of simplify the form to just what your organization uses. The general recommendation is don't put filtering and sorting on those base corporate views. Just have those be the easy personalizations and you roll those out to all users. If you do want to add those things, make sure that you are in an index situation. The last point there is if you do create a new view, whether it's especially if you're going to try to publish this out, be cautious. If your data isn't coming back pretty quick and this is a large table, don't roll that out as the default view for people. Again, if people need to get to the data, that's fine if they switch to it, but when you make them the default, then you can create issues when lots of users are hitting this every time they open the form. So we want to make sure that we're careful in those situations. And then the last thing that I want to mention, and I think there was a comment about this in the chat as well, is there is a new feature that was added in 1029 PU53 called Save Views Performance Enhancement. We do recommend that you try this out and enable this in your environments. So when Views was originally rolled out, the way that it worked was that the form would start loading, it would execute the query for the form, and then we would roll out the view. And so if the view had a query associated with it, we would actually execute that after the original form query. And so you kind of had double time to get the form loaded. What this feature does is it kind of gets rid of that multiple execution. So instead of waiting to apply everything afterwards, we go ahead and we put all of the query modifications before we execute the original form query, and so that it just executes once. So we are seeing some good performance improvements just from getting that feature enabled. And so yeah, so those are the things that we've heard. The next poll that we have for you is we're curious what concerns you have with kind of being aggressive with personalizations. Maybe it's the things I just talked about and I haven't allayed your fears. Maybe it's something else completely. So we'll give this a few seconds to let you respond to that. I'll just take some questions while we're waiting for people to respond here. So one question here was, can you replace the standard view with a customized view? Not making it the default view, but actually like hiding it or forbidding people to use the standard view. That is not actually supported yet. It is a request that we've gotten. We would only allow this if we did get to implement this. We would only allow this if you publish the default view out in place of the standard view and allow you to kind of hide the standard view. But no, that's not available yet. Let's keep looking through questions.
Jason, there's a question. Is there a way to ensure advanced filters are included in publishing the filter?
So yes, anytime that you use advanced filter and well, I'll caveat my answer. If you're on a page that allows the filters to be saved to the view, so those are list pages, simple lists, the grid view of details forms, task single, task double forms. If you're on a page with that large view selector, then anytime you go into advanced filter and you come back out, the view is going to say it's going to be marked as dirty. So those changes that you do in advanced filter will be saved to your view. If you're using advanced filter elsewhere, or if you're doing any other kind of filtering elsewhere, then those filters are not saved to the view. So you can kind of gauge it by the view selector generally.
A lot of good comments coming in here. Thank you for adding those. And I think we're going to proceed now, and we got a couple more slides and keep coming in with questions. I just want to talk about one of our customers, Drew Forward, Technical Solution Analyst at PCL Construction. They're one of our customers that have been using saved views substantially, and we asked him to kind of tell us about his experience, and this is what he told us. Views drive efficiency that allows you to tailor specific screens to your organization without any development effort and ensure consistency among your users. Without views, users will have to consistently apply specific personalization and filters they want to answer various business questions. Their users use save views to drive repeatability in the business process. Save views ensure users are being shown the right information based on what they're looking for without having to perform multiple keystrokes to get the information they're looking for. And this is consistent with other customers that are using views heavily. They talk about there's no going back. Once you've gone down this path, it's hard to imagine how you lived without these in the past. So a lot of great feedback coming from these customers that are using them heavily. So kind of just a recap, call to action. We're asking you to create and publish corporate views on your most used forms. We're then asking you to optimize the experience for your most common roles. And we truly believe that if we do this, that we will get to a higher user satisfaction, and these roles will enjoy using Dynamics 365 much more than they do today. And then one last poll question, and I know there was a lot of good feedback that came in on the QA channel as well. What additional personalization capabilities do you need to better optimize the experience? So if you can put those in here now, and you can actually repeat some of the ones that you actually put in as questions as well, that would be great. And Jason, this is another opportunity for us to take a question or two.
Sure, let me look through and see what else we have. And we limit the views based on the security role. So we effectively enforce mandatory fields created by the personalization. So yes, you can, as I demoed, you can publish views out to security roles. If you do set that required mandatory, if you use that required tool to set certain fields as mandatory, it will only, that will only be in effect while that view is being used. So if the users are using that published view for that role, it'll be mandatory. If they would switch to standard or create their own standard or their own personal view and remove that, then they can kind of get around that mandatory setting.
And Jason, there's a question about clear reset usage data, and how does that work with personalization?
So in AX 2012, personalization was stored in usage data, and that had to be reset every update. That is no longer true in finance and operations. Personalization is outside of usage data. So those are two completely separate concepts now. So if you do have to reset usage data, that should not impact your personalizations one bit. For resetting, you can clear your personalizations if you choose to. I do not believe that clears published views any longer. I think those still stick around, and those are still there, but you can clear for an individual user or for all users in the system. At this point, we don't recommend that you're deleting all personalizations unless you're just starting over in your environment.
There's some great suggestions coming in here. I really appreciate this. Love the feedback. So thank you. Keep going with that. But I'm going to just go to our last slide. And I just want to thank everybody for attending today. I want to thank everybody for the feedback that you've provided. And, you know, there's opportunities to continue working on personalization and continuing to improve it. There's a few additional resources here. We'll paste those into the chat as well, so you guys can get access to those to learn more. But maybe we have time for one more question.
What's the best way to move or copy personalizations between environments instances? So the way that you do this today is you can do bulk export through that admin personalization screen that I demoed. You can go into the publish one, you can do select all, and you can export that entire group in one bulk, and then you can re-import another environment. You can do the same thing with personal views. So it's kind of a few actions and then bundles it all up and you move it. I'll go ahead and mention one more about who can publish personalizations. So that's limited to 2 roles. So the system administrator gets this by default. And then there's also a new role that we added called Save Views Administrator. So if you give users like certain key users or power users in your departments, you can give them the rights to publish. Everyone else will just be able to use what they have and create their own if they have personalization rights.
With that, Cora, it's back to you.
Thank you so much. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like your feedback on today's session and to hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and audience for joining us today.